Yes, my name is Professor Sipho Shabalala, and I would like to talk to the public, especially the Zambian people, about my experiences that, of course, connect me to Zambia, and of course, my experiences connect me to Africa as a whole. I would start with my experiences at the University of Zambia, as used to be known as UNZA. That was the term that was utilized. And I think people may probably know that UNZA, I think first students that actually got enrolled at UNZA must have been about 1969. And I got there in 1971, so I was about just two years after the first students were enrolled. Yes, my life at university was interesting. Of course, I lived in International 1-3. You see, that is where I spent my 4 years there. And of course, the most other important area we like was what was called the mingling area. That is where we used to get our refreshment as students. And the lecture rooms really were mostly in the main, what I can call main lecture rooms areas, where I did most of my economics, business. We're doing it right there. And psychology, there was a lecture room just towards the lakes. This is where we did our psychology classes. But most of the classes that I did in terms of lectures were really accommodated within the main lecture room. It could be on the question of different floors, different rooms in different rooms, where we did mostly our economics classes, which were there, and we had even our own data room, which was there we're using for our studying, in economics, etc. And then later on, of course, there were developments where new lecture rooms were built next to the library, and where some of the classes, I attended some classes there, for instance, in economics, like on taxation, economic development, under lecturer Kwasi, who was coming from, for instance, from Kenya. That's also another area that's important. For instance, people who might be with me there, those in law, the person who was teaching us was Chris Uchegwonze, was a Zimbabwean. We're dealing with the law there. The name of the course was called Law of Business Associations. Normally in other countries they call it company law, but calling it company law is a misnomer, because really a company is only one type of business association. There are partnerships, there are all those type of cooperatives and the like. So it was given the right name, Law of Business Association. And we were taught by Chris Uchegwonze. And then in contract law, we were taught by Mubako, who was also a Zimbabwean. And he also was quite involved in developing a certain law for what was called mercantile law in the country. And in the commercial law, we were also taught by Endoro, who was also a Zimbabwean. So what I'm just saying, therefore, some guys were with, they will remember that. And in economics, especially dealing with economics of rural development, we were taught by Semgeza. So a number of guys they will remember that at one time we had to go to, we went to Luapula with Semgeza, as contracted by the banks to go and look into the issues of financing small-scale farmers in that area under the leadership of Semgeza. So this is where we were, and we used to call our place where we used to dining room, we used to call it dining hall. I don't know why we call it dining hall. We said, hey, we'll meet at the dining hall. And this is where we used to live. And the lady was managing the dining hall was coming from Ghana. And therefore, sometimes we used to abuse it a lot. But and I must tell you, those days, the dining hall at the University of Zambia could beat quite a number of hotels when it comes to the menu that was available there. You know, name it, the menu was excellent. And during the dinner time, we could even carry something, your sandwiches, make sandwiches to carry to your rooms, so that normally after 7:30, we used to go to the library to study. Library used to close around 11:30, somewhere there. Then you will have something to go and eat. And of course, we were well provided with our own student canteen. Don't miss that, with our own student canteen. And we're buying beer at a discount. So we used to enjoy ourselves at the student canteen there, and which was not far from the library and not far from the dining hall. But later on, they thought we were making too much noise there. Then they moved the student canteen quite next to the lakes. That's where now we try to resist to be taken far off there, but we realized that we were making noise sometime for those that are studying, you know, in the library. But it was fun, and we were well provided for, as I say. That time, the country had resources, and they looked after us very well. Our rooms were well looked after, with people who were coming every day to come and sweep, clean our rooms, and our rooms were quite good. And although we used to abuse them, you know, students, but our place were well maintained. And I could tell you, our bathrooms and those areas were excellent, you know, were excellent, absolutely tip top. So that's really was the life those days at UNZA. I'm telling you, it was really, really, really good. And of course, the country had resources at that time, and probably we could be accused of having expended too much resources, which were supposed to have been put for developmental purposes. And we used to have the area where females were staying. It was called October 24. That was the name given to it. So you'll hear guys saying, we're going to October. When they say going to October, we say, now, okay, they're going to the female squatters. And I don't know why, I cannot really remember why it was called October. So apparently the female students there, you know, were seen as representing the independence of Zambia. And I think it was an important acknowledgement on the female students to be associated with the independence of the whole country, and they used to feel proud when people say we're going to October, which was in full October 24th. That was the name of the female squatters. Obviously, like any other university, especially at the time, with couple disagreements. Some of them were political conflicts within the country. And especially at the time when the UPP came on board, and there used to be contestations with UNIP, and some of these contestations will flow into the university. But principally, the first major strike that we had, there was a time when students were accusing the counter government to have been collaborating with the South African government. There was time when some letters, exchanges between Foster and President Kaunda, those letters got revealed, and then students went wild to say, all this time we are a frontline state, but you are engaged in the correspondence with the racist regimes, and therefore we went on strike. That was probably in our second year when we were doing that. It was quite well. The university got closed for a while. It really got closed. And the Skatanas there at that time were quite also vocal, you know, very vocal. And some other guys, I just forgotten, some other guys were coming from the Copper Belt doing medicine. So the university had to be closed. And therefore we experienced that. And we as foreign students, well, we helped and accommodated somewhere. And it took time before the matter was resolved and it got reopened. So the question of university student strike is an old one. And I remember even just after we had finished, there was a second one, yeah, a big one too. University was closed almost for the whole month to 2 months. And in other words, we say they were mostly driven by political issues and political differences. And as I say, the first one was mostly in terms of what students accused the government of conniving with the South African government. And later, other ones that followed, I think the second one, it was dealing with the contradictions just in the country and students feeling that development in the country and resources in the country were not properly being managed, and the development agenda was being undermined by certain activities and certain behaviors of the government. And the students who had very, 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 very active students at that time. So I can really say that if there are still such strikes there, we were the forerunners in those. So it's not a question of whatever students are doing that was not done before. Who were there, we did it, and I know very well we all participated in that. And I think it is important to raise up a couple issues about the university. One is that it was a key university on the southern side of the continent of Africa, and it was placed and positioned to compete in contradictions with what was happening in the secular colonial South Africa. And it therefore served two primary purposes, which sometimes people have forgotten. One, it had to develop the human resources, capabilities, etc. for Zambia. But secondly, it had also to develop human resources for some countries in Southern Africa, and especially those that were surrounding South Africa. And because in South Africa, not many of the university institutions were admitting Africans. So even Africans from the neighboring countries could only attend certain one or two universities, e.g. like Fort Hare, where a number of people went there. And then like some of the medical schools, Wentworth was part of the University of Natal, where some people went. So that is two aspects about the University of Zambia. At the University of Zambia, I enrolled and did two, what was then called, we'll be calling those as majors. I did two majors. Normally, students were doing one major. I did two majors, one in economics and one in business administration. And I managed to do those, and the requirement that sometimes I needed have to do more courses than were normally done by students, which were 4 courses in a year. So sometimes I'll have to add one or more courses so that I would be in a position to graduate with 2 majors, which were important to me at the time. University of Zambia was a pioneering institution, as I've already indicated. I'll just mention some of the people I was with there, And then I will also make some few comments. I mean, I was there with the likes of the late Mundias Katane. I was there with especially within the class, people like Robert Penza. I was there with people like Obina Bwalia, Chifumi Banda, gave us my boss, Bosha, who else? Quite a number of the guys, Sonda, James, Musekanya, Henry Chanda was my close friend, and Henry Chanda, and Sambo, that is Tony Sambo, Bobby Bwalia, though they found me when I was almost finishing. And those are some of the people who really became critical and important within the whole development endeavor of Zambia. Those were my colleagues, and many more that I don't need to bother you with. I think the critical point and the role of the university there, I've already indicated, was really to provide the basic means, basic human resources for the country. Probably people don't know, at independence, Zambia had, I think, 109 graduates, and only about 1/5 of the population of Zambia had primary school education. And therefore it was so crucial that for any effort to develop that country, education was number one. And I would like to emphasize the fact that the Zambian government at the time did actually identify this critical imperative, and they went ahead and made sure that there was a university to provide the human resources. All students, Zambian students, were provided by the government scholarship. They were covered by the government. But there was a proviso, which sometimes other students Zambian students did not like. 65% of the people that were provided with a scholarship by the Zambian government had to do education. And because this was critical, a small number had to do mining engineering and agriculture. And you could see where the Zambian government was directing its effort. There was a need to build in schools, both primary and especially the secondary schools. And to do that, Zambia did not have teachers. So there was an interesting growth. The growth of numbers of students graduating at university had to go pari passu with the growth of new secondary schools. And I can tell you it was a marvelous thing to see that process unfolding. As we had graduates come up from university, there will be new secondary schools being established, because the aim was that at least initially every province was to have a secondary school, and then thereafter they could be added. But as I've said already, it was important that there should be therefore teachers coming from there. So if we were to say, as normally it is said, that the university are there to provide the critical human resources and capabilities for the country, there is no better example of that than the one I saw in Zambia through the auspices and through the project that is University of Zambia project. And I think that is important for the Zambian people to understand. And it was well endowed, let me just add that. When it was established, it was well endowed. And there are also let me probably say one important historical fact that people should remember. The scholarship, that was the lecturers that were there at the University of Zambia, were pulled up from Europe, America, from Africa, from Eastern Europe, as the case may be. So within that university, we had a confluence of expertise that is coming up from all those regions. So it was in itself a port of enrichment, collaboration from different scholars coming up from these different places in the world. In other words, we had this fundamental advantage of accessing knowledge from the different parts of the regions of the world. So that's one aspect. Related to that aspect, that what was appealing was that all these countries wanted to have a university at the southernmost part of a liberated Africa, which will compete with universities in the secular colonial South Africa. And that is important. And therefore, scholars, be it economists, engineers, scientists, name it, especially those who were coming from progressive quarters, wanted to be in that university, so as to create the African human resources, African manpower, that will therefore compete with whatever the racist system in South Africa was producing. And in that way, therefore, it did produce a number of important people and played a major role. May I also add, when I was dealing with, for instance, people that I was with there, which other perhaps people would not know, people like the current president of Zimbabwe. I was with him there, at least I think for a year he was there, Emerson Mnangagwa, you see. And also the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Fred Chaba, was there at that university. So all I'm trying to emphasize here that you could see the contributions even for the region that the University of Zambia managed to provide. I can add up some people also now from the region, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland. And also may I add this thing that probably some people would not know. As part of his Pan-Africanist role and sense of responsibility, the government of Zambia provided scholarships for the students coming from Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana, so that they could do certain courses which they would not be in a position to do in their areas, because those three countries, for instance, had a combined university which was called University of Botswana, Lesotho and Swaziland, UBLS, which was located in Lesotho. But its capacity and its spread of faculty was quite limited. And therefore, what the Zambian government did, it offered scholarships to the students coming from those countries, especially to do engineering, medicine, agriculture. Quite a number of people who are doctors in Lesotho, for instance, I have a colleague there, Dr. Muji, he trained there. Even in Botswana, we have got a world-famous doctor there, Dr. what is his name now? Dr. I don't remember his name. Makani. He also did his medicine there. In engineering, for instance, you have got people in Botswana and etc. A number of doctors in Swaziland, for instance, Dr. Gama, Ben, Dlamini, etc. are all students. I mean, they are all people who were financed, given scholarship rather, by the Zambian government And that is a contribution. So Zambian government on one hand was developing critical human resources for the country. But at the same time, it reasoned up that there are those countries neighboring South Africa, the racist South African government, area, who needed that type of assistance. And I will want to emphasize that sometimes the Zambian people should feel proud on that thing. And in most cases, people are unaware about that type of contribution. I will say, therefore, probably ending up this, my first talk here, is that Zambia, and this must be emphasized, Zambia developed her own human resources post-1964. The human resources, today we've got scholars, number of universities that are there, but that is where it started. And I would like just to emphasize one little thing here, that we have to be critical. We may add universities, but what is critical now that we must make sure that we have got technology intensive institutions, so as to make sure that the critical technology human resources are developed in the country. Because this is the next round in the transformation of Zambia. Those are the type of skills that we need on board. Research institutions, technology-based areas that will therefore be in a position to create the knowledge development. In fact, we should now move it into something we call the knowledge development institutions. And because Zambia did have this what I would call an exemplary situation whereby it developed its own human resources right from its beginning. It was because of its relationship within the Federation, which is going to be our next topic.